Good morning. This is the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities for Monday, May 8th, 2023. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearing and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. Will the clerk please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate they are present when their names are called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Mark Squilla.
Morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
Councilmember Kendra Brooks.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilmember Sharon Vaughn. And we also have in attendance Councilmember Catherine.
Good morning, everyone.
Richardson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities regarding resolution number 230061. Will the clerk please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution 230061, a resolution authorizing the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities to hold hearings to examine the Philadelphia Water Department request to increase water, sewer, and stormwater rates and charges and its impacts on the citizens of Philadelphia.
Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Will the clerk please call the panel for resolution number 230061?
For our first panel, we have Commissioner Randy Hayman.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Council Member.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Outstanding background you have there as well.
I thought I'd bring clean water.
Yeah, I like that. Just state your name and title for the record, and please begin your testimony.
Randy Hayman, Commissioner, Philadelphia Water Department. Good morning, Chairman Johnson and members of the Transportation and Public Utilities Committee. As noted, I'm Randy Hayman, Water Commissioner, Philadelphia Water Department. Joining me today are Lawrence Yangley, Deputy Water Commissioner of Finance, and Benjamin Jewell, Deputy Water Commissioner of Operations, as well as other members of our Philadelphia Water Department's leadership team. The Water Department provides water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater services to residential, commercial, and institutional customers within the city. These services are essential and the foundation of public health in Philadelphia. Earlier this year, the department requested an adjustment in rates and charges so that we will have sufficient resources to continue current and planned programs and to pay significantly increasing operating costs in fiscal years 2024 and 2025. Additional revenues are needed to ensure that clean water is delivered as safely and reliably as possible, and that wastewater treatment and stormwater management services meet our community's needs. In November 2012, Philadelphia residents voted to amend the Home Rule Charter to allow City Council to establish an independent body, the Philadelphia Water, Sewer, and Stormwater Rate Board. The board was formed to replace the Water Department as the entity responsible for setting water, wastewater, and stormwater rates. If the rate board approves the water department's full request, a typical residential customers using 450 cubic feet or 3,366 gallons of water per month would see the bill increase by about 11.8% in fiscal year 2024 and 8.3% in fiscal year 2025, or approximately $8.16 per month beginning on September 1st, 2023, and an additional $6.45 beginning the September 1st, 2024. The Water Department recognizes that any increase in rates can be a hardship, especially right now. However, this increase is necessary to maintain essential services and address the department's current and planned projects. PWD is not a corporation designed to make a profit. When we request higher rates, we only request what we project will be needed in the coming years, and we show our customers why we are requesting the amounts through the public rate setting process managed by the rate board. As explained in the department's testimony to the rate board, which is available online on the rate board's website, a rate increase is necessary now to sustain our operations. The department needs additional revenues to pay significant increases in operating expenses. Costs for labor, chemicals, materials, and supplies are rising along with increased costs for regulatory compliance combined with capital program needs. For instance, the cost per ton for chemicals used in water treatment has risen in fiscal year 2023 as much as 142% above fiscal year 2022 levels. Chemical costs are beyond our control and alone add tens of millions of dollars to our annual operating budget. Likewise, the cost of electricity and natural gas used to power our treatment plants and pump water to residents is increasing, with costs projected to increase by nearly 11% for electricity and 19% for gas in the next fiscal year. PWD also continues to invest in much-needed upgrades in critical water and wastewater infrastructure, including replacing aging water mains to reduce the occurrence of water main breaks and increase the reliability of water service, extending the life and reliability of the wastewater system through repairs and improvements to treatment facilities, and improving drinking water treatment and improving our water conveyance system by rehabilitating critical water infrastructure such as pumping stations. All projects planned for fiscal year 2024 and 25 are critical investments to ensure the utility can support its operations and continue to provide safe and reliable service to current and future customers with a well-maintained water and wastewater system you can count on. One of the ways Philadelphia Water is working to save customers money and reduce costs is by applying for low-interest loans from state and federal sources to lessen the burden of capital program costs. We are also pursuing grant opportunities where feasible. As was announced during President Biden's February visit to our Belmont plant, the department also signed a $341 million low-interest loan master agreement with the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, WIFIA. The first loan closed for $19 million. Over the next 3 years, additional funds from bipartisan infrastructure law will continue to flow to PennVest for the distribution to utilities and municipalities, a total of $1.2 billion, including over $500 million already appropriated to PennVest in the last 2 years, is expected for water infrastructure. To date, Philadelphia Water has been approved for low-interest loans of $386 million from PennVest. We will continue to seek Philadelphia's share of this funding, and we have no shortage of worthy projects ready to implement. However, the department has been informed that by PennVest and under their current methodologies for determination of whether the applicant qualifies for grants, Philadelphia does not qualify for any grant funding to access bipartisan infrastructure law dollars. While low-interest loans are invaluable, providing funds for projects will be crucial. The lack of grant funding for Philadelphia, which serves some of the poorest communities in the nation, was a central focus of the department's testimony this March before the United States Senate. Additionally, the city is working with Governor Shapiro's office to address these barriers. The department remains firmly committed to water affordability. To date, there are approximately 46,000 customers benefiting from our income-based water billing assistance programs, including the Tiered Assistance Program, better known as TAP, and our Senior Citizen Discount. Last year, the department and the water revenue worked to help Philadelphians receive nearly $14 million to pay off water bills debt through the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program created by the state using temporary COVID funding. We are currently backing efforts to create a permanent federal safety net program modeled after this program. In 2022, we introduced new policies that greatly reduced the number of customers eligible for payment-related water shutoff. And we are continuing to work with the administration to fine-tune those policies and increase outreach to customers facing shutoff or who have growing debt. Households that are facing hardship can access these programs on our website at www.villa.gov/waterbillhelp or by calling 215-685-6300. Again, that's 215-685-6300, Monday through Friday between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Thank you very much, Councilmember Johnson. And at this time, I am ready and my staff are prepared to answer any additional questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your testimony. And before I open it up for questions from members of the committee, just a couple of questions. And so obviously, in this hearing, we're examining the water rate increase on residents here in the city of Philadelphia. And one of the main questions that has risen throughout this process is the funds that we're receiving from the American Rescue Plan Act will not be allocated toward the capital projects, that will not be used toward reducing the rate, but specifically we're going to be raising the rates and using the funds for a variety of different other projects. So can you just elaborate why we have to move forward with the rate increase with this significant funds that are coming down? Two, I want to also get an idea of your conversations with the Director of Finance regarding funding for capital projects and using the ARPA money as well to support this rate increase on our residents.
Yes, per the direction of City Council several weeks ago, we did reach out to the Department of Finance and spoke with Rob DeVoe and his team. It was their decision that we are not going to receive any of the American Rescue Plan Act money. I don't like speaking for the director. He has sent us a letter. I believe it's in the evidence, and I'll point to it for more clarity. But I will add that basically the feeling was that if they were to give us that money, it could very well violate our bond indentures and lower the rating of both the city and Philadelphia Water. The logic, I believe, behind it is that Philadelphia Water is a separate entity and should be able to develop a rate system that allows it to remain sustained. And the feeling is if we receive that money from the city and intertwine the two pots of money, that it would lead to a lowering of our rates. And so that's my understanding. But for further clarification, I ask that you speak with the finance department.
Okay. Also, in terms of the rate, can you just clarify how much the rate increase will be, the hike will be per household over the next several years?
Okay. Yes. What we'll see for 2024, the current amount that individuals pay is $69.31. What will happen in 2024 is the 11.8% increase. That will take them to $77.47. And then in 2025, there would be an 8.3% increase. That would raise us to $83.92.
And do you have numbers on the number of counts and also in dollar and cents that we have assisted individuals who fall back in paying their bills, or I would say would be delinquent, and we provided support for them?
Okay. I know that we have 46,000 individuals who benefit from the TAP program and our senior citizen discount program. And I do want to say that Philadelphia is known across the country. You know that I've worked for 2 other water utilities, and everybody looks to Philadelphia as a leader on having a safety net for those who are unable to pay their water bills. As I said, we have 46,000 that are in TAP and in the senior citizen program and are being protected. I'll allow the Revenue Department, Susan Crosby, or to add on if they wish to.
Susan?
Good morning. Susan Crosby, Deputy Revenue Commissioner for Water. We are very proud of the assistance that we're able to offer our low-income neighbors here in Philadelphia. As the Water Commissioner mentioned, we have one of the nation's most expansive assistance programs for our low-income customers. They can receive up to a customized bill as low as $12 per month. We have recently increased the subscription rate to that program over the last 5 months by 5,000 customers. And we are continuing efforts to increase those numbers through auto enrollment using the LIWAP grantees. And we expect to have another 5,000 customers added through that. So when you combine that with our current senior citizen discount customers, we are nearing the 50,000 customers subject to check. I'll give you an official number with today's numbers. So we're excited about that. We also are doing a lot of reach out during our ramp up to the shutoff season to let customers know of all of the protections that are available to them to keep their water flowing. In addition, the remaining federal grant dollars that are out there to erase their utility bills.
Councilmember Johnson, if I may add, you asked about the increase of the rate. I just want to make sure that it's clear that operating costs are projected to increase by $73.3 million, $73.3 million from fiscal year 23 to 24. Total projected operating costs for fiscal year 2023, $797.9 million. In 24, it'll reach $871.2 million, and later it'll reach in 2025, $95.3. Now, there are a number of items that are rising that we at Philadelphia Water do not have control over. As we know, inflation is ravaging the country. And so we have labor costs raising about $14.3 million. I mentioned chemical costs earlier, it's at $15.7 million, and materials, equipment, and supplies are at $3.5 million. When we look at our capital improvement plan, it's now estimated for fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 28 at $4.5 billion. That is 14.3 higher than the previously estimated $3.98 billion. And so we're in a position, because of COVID, also keep in mind, during COVID, we did not do shutoffs. We continued to supply water, and individuals were not able to pay. It was okay because we thought it was the right thing for health and safety to allow people to have water, make water present. But understand, we cannot continue to mitigate increases using our financial reserves. That's what kept us afloat. Reserves have helped manage revenue adjustments in the past. Reserves are now at a minimum level. There's no guarantee they will be adequate to address future challenges without rate relief. And credit rating agencies, and this is very important, because credit rates determine future money that we're able to obtain, the cost of it. Credit rating agencies have been clear. Pushing rate stabilization fund reserves beyond $120 million result in a downgrade, raising future borrowing costs. So I just wanted to share that information.
Sure, thank you. What's in the fund right now? What's the reserve fund? What's the dollar amount?
I'll ask Lawrence Yangley. Can you address that?
Good morning, Councilman.
Good morning, Lawrence.
Yeah, the dollar amount now in the rate stabilization fund is about 138 million.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
138 million.
138 million?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So
and if I may just add to that is that during the 2018 rate bowl mandate, the reserves is targeted at 135 million. So we are very close to the target as set by the rate bowl. Just to add that. Okay.
You're at 135. Okay.
Yeah.
In the reserve fund. All right. So, Commissioner, I just want to get some additional clarity on something. Sound like I hear you saying. So, the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a significant increase in operating costs and capital costs, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, from my understanding, now, we're not eligible, meaning Philadelphia Water Department isn't eligible for bipartisan infrastructure funds. Is that correct?
No, we're eligible for loans, low interest loans.
Okay.
But we're not receiving the grants. But we're going to be meeting with Harrisburg and with Pinvest to try to address that. But at this time, we're not eligible.
And did they say why we're not eligible for infrastructure funds? That this is supposed to be a significant investment in infrastructure across the country, or they just focusing on bridges and roads and not actual?
Well, it's the methodology that they use. 1 second. And basically, it comes down to this, is how they feel that our rates aren't high enough and are not enough of a burden on the individuals that warrants us to increase, to be able to receive the grants. Now, there's a couple of elements. They would like to see us have a separate wastewater billing system, which is outside what our system is able to do at this time. It would cost millions of dollars to change. Then they also have the rate comparison to their Pinvest affordability targets. That's what I was mentioning earlier. They think that our rates aren't high enough, not high enough. And then loan and forgiveness impact criteria for grant funds. The impact of an individual residential bill must be at least $15 annually. For Philadelphia, this amounts to a single project in excess of $300 million. And then they have an issue regarding grant funding availability. Pinvest has limited grant capacity, historically around $15 million a quarter. Given the cost of single project that would provide $15 a year, as I mentioned just a minute ago, user rate impact, and Pinvest limited grant capacity, grant funds in the amount needed are simply not available. So basically, they're saying our rates aren't high enough. They have a limited amount of money that they're going to provide. They would like for us to restructure our billing system, which would cost us millions of dollars to do. And so there's a number of factors, but MDO has reached out to Harrisburg, and we're going to be having conversations with Pinvest. And I testified before the Senate to try to put a light on this issue just 2 months ago. And we may be able to see some change. I do not know. I cannot guarantee, but we'll certainly welcome any grant dollars that we're able to receive.
Okay, and before I turn over to my colleague, I'm sure there wasn't an outcome, but what's the preliminary feedback from the rate board hearing?
From the rate board, there hasn't been one. It's still going on.
Still going on. Okay, just wanted to get clarity on that. Okay, at this time, I'm going to open it up for members of the committee. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay, hearing none. Commissioner, if you don't mind sticking around.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Call on the next panel. Would the clerk please call the next panel?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, okay. I kind of figured you was.
Yes, I apologize. For some
Councilwoman?
reason, I cannot get this chat to work this morning.
Okay.
I apologize.
No problem. I thought something was going on.
Right.
Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listen, I could not get that chat to work, and I'm not even going to try. But good morning, Commissioner, and good morning to everyone represented from the Water Department. And I see Mike Carroll there from Infrastructure. I wanted to respectfully request of the administration and whoever can arrange this and or organize this for the hearing this morning is if we could have someone from Finance to please get on the hearing, if that would be possible, because I asked questions during our budget hearing with you all relative to how you all interface interdepartmentally to determine how and when you all could use your inflation reserve spending and for what. And I know that we weren't able to have I know you did respond to the questions, but I wanted to have someone from finance also on this call to help us sort of walk through that as we go down this process. Because I do think we need to better understand that moving forward so that we know when it's appropriate to then come back to our customers and to our citizens to then say, we have to do a 20% increase for, whatever the reasons may be. We have to know that we've exhausted all internal possibilities before we move in that direction. So I just want to be on the record again, and I've said this multiple times, as being against this proposed water rate increase for our consumers. I think that they are overburdened during this time. Particularly because of the rising rates previously, but also because of everything else that's going on in our economy overall, and also specifically in the city around our property taxes. And so if we could get someone from finance on this call that can maybe walk through exactly what transpired interdepartmentally between the water department and finance relative to the recession, inflation, and reopening reserve, that would be helpful.
So, Councilmember, I sent a note. We'll see if we can get somebody to respond to my note. I just want to kind of make sure I'm clear on the specifics. The question about how we interacted, you may be aware that the department did formally send a letter in 2021 to the finance director requesting ARPA funds, and that the finance department, sent a letter back formally denying that request. So, I mean, that's the heart of the interaction that took place. And I'm imagining what you're actually maybe more interested in is the reasoning why finance decided to turn out that request. I think that's what the commissioner tried to speak to before. But we will ask somebody to join, and if there's some clarification we can give, maybe we could talk through some of that in a little bit more detail. I'm sorry, Councilman Johnson.
No, it's okay. I wanted to ask Commissioner Heyman, is this referring to the letter that you mentioned that was submitted as a part of the testimony, the response back from the finance committee?
Yes, and we sent a letter, just 3 months ago, and they responded. So within the last 3 months, they responded. But this issue was brought up before, so there are earlier letters. But the one I'm referencing is that they said to us just in the last 3 to 2 months that they could not intermingle the two, that it would lower the bond rating for both Philadelphia Water and for the city if they did so. Because Philadelphia Water has to be a standalone in the eyes of the rating agencies.
Okay.
Right. And right. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Right. And that, I understand, which is why we're offering the BSR update legislation so that we can ensure that we keep, separately our bond rating high, which, is just going from A2 to A1. But I just feel like I need to further understand this, and we need to sort of get this on the record so that if and when this comes up again in the future, we know what needs to take place interdepartmentally in advance of requesting any proposed rate increases.
Okay.
So if you could just, I think it'll be helpful too, if you can describe for us the relationship you just mentioned, the relationship between the water fund and the general fund, because there's been a ton of discussion um, during all of our budget proceedings, and I think just when all these letters, started going back and forth, if you could just describe to us, for the record, what that relationship is between the water fund and the general fund.
If I can just jump in, I just want to say that the finance director indicated he's not available. He doesn't have anyone available today, but we will try and put in writing, I think, as best as possible, a little bit more of the reasoning, and maybe that can speak a little bit to the difference in structure between the two entities that could be helpful. But Commissioner, I can hand it back to you, or I could try and take on the question that I think you're asking, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. And, essentially.
Hold on. I'm sorry, Mike. 1 second before you begin. To your point, and I understand that finance is stating they don't have anyone available. But Mr. Chair, what I would respectfully request, because this is such an important issue to our constituents, it will impact the lives of, almost every single Philadelphian, I respectfully request that we have an additional hearing where finance can come on with the water department so that we can receive questions with everyone in the same hearing at the same time. So it's not a lot of back and forth and, not a lot of, letters. We all should be able to be on at the same time because a lot of these questions do interface with their department as well. So I'll request that we have an additional hearing. I'm sorry, Mike, you can, thank you, Mr. Chair, and you can go ahead.
You're welcome.
Well, maybe that's best, and I'll just reserve any comments, in lieu of that hearing taking place. It would probably be best to get it directly from the finance team.
Okay, that'll be great. And then my next question is really to that point. We recognize that it does, obviously make sense that the water fund is separate from the general fund, because we have to make sure that all of our ratepayer dollars are not being used for initiatives and projects, better suited for the general fund. Is there truly no way for the general fund to be used to help offset some of the rising costs for the water department?
That was my question too. Good question.
Right.
So if council pass an ordinance requiring for general fund, funds to be spent on water department projects, that would be legitimate. I think the issue is, as opposed to something that's based on a project where that might typically take place, what we're contemplating here is that the routine operation of the water department be funded by the city. And that's what's so alarming to, financial markets. That's the thing that really gets them uncomfortable, because what it appears to them as is that, in fact, the water department is not solvent. And the city is stepping in to make the water department appear solvent on a temporary basis. And so that's why I think from that bondholders perspective, it starts to look like, I'll be a little bit careful, like we're messing around with the numbers a little bit to make it seem like the water department can stand on its own 2 feet, when in fact, the more reasonable, common sense way of looking at it is it couldn't do it without the city stepping in.
Right, but Mike, to your point though, we have defrayed some of the pension costs, right? So why can't we defray something like energy costs? Like, it's not like that does not happen, okay? We know it, like we've defrayed some of the pension costs. Why?
Well,
Right. Meaning there's a way to help defray cost.
Well, energy markets are very peculiar, and in general, what we try to do in the energy markets is to establish long-term contracts for energy. Those are, regulated in an entirely different way than pensions are. We come in not just under PUC rules, but also the kind of the energy purchasing market, which is I can't even remember the name of it. There's a 6-state regional agency which sort of sets the rates, and we need to comply with all the rules that they set up too. So, folks who are supplying the energy do expect to be paid. I'm not aware of any mechanisms that would be parallel to what we're able to do with pensions, which are, longer term, decades long financial commitments, whereas energy often operates, minute by minute, hour by hour. And our efforts to enter into long-term energy contracts typically are like maybe 1 year ahead, 2 years ahead, where we're hedging a market that really literally fluctuates, minute by minute and second by second, depending on what's going on around the country with supply and demand. So there may be something there. We could certainly explore what that would look like. But as the commissioner is saying, the bulk of our issues now are, a variety of inflationary expenses that cover things like chemicals, that cover, energy, like we're talking about, that cover wages, that cover things like that, that we just have to kind of ask the water department, as an independent agency, to identify the best way to manage. And like I think we're saying, there may be opportunities for the general fund to supply funds to help out with that on a case by case basis. But if that's the routine way of funding the water department, then that's a whole different type of concern.
Right. So I think we're all saying around the same thing relative to this being a larger, more long-term problem and issue. But if we're doing this every few years and it's still unaffordable, that's a problem. And it's something that needs to be evaluated, meaning we have to evaluate everything to ensure that we don't continue to come back every few years with the same problem and then saying it's again unaffordable. It's just, we can't keep doing the same thing and think we're going to get different results relative to our ability to keep things affordable for our ratepayers, recognizing that, we have the level of poverty that we have in our city. What do you think some of those opportunities could be, Mike? What type of opportunities do we have to sort of right the ship here?
Well, I'll ask the commissioner to step in. What I'll say, though, I think we're on the right track with the efforts to get grants and focus on capital investments that will lower all operating costs. I mean, that is going to be a long-term undertaking, and we have to first move the needle on some of the lawmaking, which is probably mostly focused right now at the state level with the constraints that are put on Penvest funding. But also we're hearing people around the country are facing the same issue. All the conversations I have with our team in DC, with our delegation in DC, with the Biden administration, municipal water utilities are getting kind of edged out in a way where they're not getting the access to the capital they need to take on the projects, which over time, I need to be clear about that, over time will start to bring down some of the operating costs. And we may be 10 years away from a world where we're not doing as many main breaks. We're not having to patch things up. We're not having systems at the plants and so forth, be a concern for us to make sure that we can keep up and running. That won't address everything, but it'll address a lot of the operating costs which lead to the rates. And we need to get there, though. And so that political work, I think everybody needs to be a part of, is just to make sure we're raising our voices, maybe first in Harrisburg, but certainly in DC, to get these rules changed, because they're frankly, people are telling me they're illogical, and people are starting to see they're illogical. But when we're talking about politics in Harrisburg, not everyone's concerned about what's going on in the city the way that they need to be. And so we just need to make sure we're operating in unison on a lot of that. In the meantime,
to your point,
I'm sorry.
To your point, though, what I think would be helpful is if this could be in writing, if we could get something from the water department, from infrastructure to state. These are the 3 to 5 things that we really want to focus on at the state level. And if these things move, and if we're able to move the needle on these issues, it could help us with whatever it may be.
Okay.
And I'll start with just PINVEST,
Yes,
right? You
that's
mentioned PINVEST and the stringent guidelines around the loan requirements. Okay, well, that's one area that we can all work on together to say, listen, here's 3 to 5 things. Philadelphia delegation in Harrisburg, Speaker McClinton, Appropriations Chair Harris, and delegation leader Cephas. Here's 3 to 5 things that we think will help us help our ratepayers with the Philadelphia Water Department to help us either decrease or defray some of these capital costs so that we can continue to keep costs low. Like, can we get that from you all? Or
yes,
even if you all are working on that
yeah,
with your Harrisburg lobbyists, can we be a part of that? And
yes,
particularly
absolutely.
Councilmember Johnson, who's the leader on this issue, and then all of the rest of us, and I'm not on this committee, but I deeply care about this issue, so that we can be a part of that lobbying process as well and use the power of the bully pulpit that we have to shine a light on this issue and to keep talking about this issue, because we could very well do resolutions in support of, for example, if a House bill or resolution is introduced that could help us shift or change the regulations or guidelines around PINVEST, for example. But we have to know that information from you all. We
Yes.
need to know what, your sort of 3 to 5 things are that in the immediate short term will help us in the long term. And I've even talked to the committee members nationwide on the local government advisory committee for the EPA about this issue, about the loans. Okay. Because it was something else that came up and it was only a loan. I'm like, well, we prefer to have the grant, right? So that we don't have to pay anything back or, pay bond service each and every year. But also, it's an opportunity for all of us to work collectively together so that we're not operating in silos and so that we know what the real priorities are so that when we come to this process, we know where we are, And so I just
Absolutely.
respectfully request that if we could do that as well, that would be helpful, because that's another part of the issue is that even I've seen from my colleagues across the country, they're all saying that, the state folks, are primarily responsible for working on the laws and issues that impact their systems as well,
Mhm.
and that everybody's working in silos. I think this is an opportunity for us to work together. We know that our bond rating has changed. And so that, help us to defray some of our capital costs right there, right? Just going from A2 to A1 as a city, not waterfront. But we can work together on getting this done. So I just ask that if we could do that as well, that would be helpful.
Okay, we will work on that. Thank you very much, council member. That will be very helpful.
If I may mention, that we will put that together for you, council person. The other thing I would mention, again, we received $14 million to pay off, or Philadelphians did, to pay off water bill debt. And the Senate was talking 2 months ago about trying to make a national program. So that's something else that we will push for, and then we could also coordinate with the city council if they wish in any way, or with Harrisburg, anyway, to try to push that forward, because that too would give rate relief to the individuals who can't afford it.
Great. Well, to your point, I would welcome taking any of these issues to the local government advisory committee as well, so that we can get additional assistance from the federal government to help us with defraying any of our costs so that we don't have to move in the direction of a increase. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. I just thought you were a member, so we have to make you an honorary member of this committee. I just want additional clarity, Mike and Commissioner Hayman, as well as Deputy Commissioner Carroll, just around the interaction you've had with the Shapiro administration and PINVEST, particularly around support for addressing our issues around capital improvements, water infrastructure, and the funding barriers that we encounter. So can you just elaborate on that just a little bit for me, please?
Yeah, I can speak to that. And It's been a little bit of a roller coaster, I'll tell you that, but it's not. I won't blame anybody for that. And I think the fact is the Shapiro administration came in, and after the inauguration, Brian Regley, who works as kind of the infrastructure czar under the governor, met with us. He meets with us regularly. And in fact, actually, he is now kind of leading up the Penvest board. So he's expressed to us a lot of passion about these issues and a desire to work with the water department and us to find a resolution. And as they were getting their feet on the ground, we were hearing really great stuff, very encouraging that they were going to change the rules, kind of as the board, they were going to change the rules. Unfortunately, a couple weeks back, we had a meeting, and I guess they had been talking to their attorneys, and it turns out that the board on its own does not have the authority to modify those rules. It can propose some rulemaking, but they need to work through the legislature in order to get the key issues addressed. And so that's why, although I had heard before it was the legislator, we kind of hit pause on some of the things I think that Council Member Gilmore Richardson is asking for in order for us to kind of coalesce our delegation and proceed to work with the legislator. So we're going to need to, I think, as she's pointed out correctly, go back to that work, start to really hone in on the handful of things we want to see changed, and then bring that back to Harrisburg, working with the Shapiro administration to get that done. And I am very grateful that Mr. Regley is going to visit us here. He's going to spend hopefully a good part of a day talking to folks at the water department to understand the issues in more detail, and he will be an ally of ours as we work with the legislator to make some changes so that we can have success. So I feel encouraged, but at the same time, a little bit frustrated that we weren't able to move this forward a little bit better without having to go back and get a bill. But we'll do what we need to do, and we will certainly work with you on City Council so that you guys can be a part of this effort.
Okay. And I do know on a state level, young lady who has been advocating around this issue is State Representative Derisha Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not sure what committee she sits on, but I know she's been an advocate, particularly around this issue with the rate hike and trying to see how they can be supported on a state level. So maybe we get everybody in the same room from the legislative standpoint to see how we can get some additional support on the state level. For the record, I want to note that Councilman Curtis Jones is present, as well as Councilman Anthony Phillips. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee for this panel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Majority Leader, Councilman Curtis Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you guys for the hard work you do every day to keep our major systems infrastructure moving. There was a study done maybe almost a decade ago that showed that we lose 23% of our clean water through breaks. 23% of our clean water through breaks. Is that stat still close to being accurate?
Okay. I'll ask Ben Jewell, Deputy Commissioner Operations, to address that.
Good morning, Ben Jewell, Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Philadelphia Water Department. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Councilmember Jones, Councilmember Johnson. I don't have the data in front of me right now, but we do perform an annual water audit that looks at water losses. Those water losses are from various sources, through water main breaks on the public side, through service leaks on the private side between the public mains and the meters. And then there's obviously fire suppression system losses that are unmetered as well. We perform annual water audits. We're actually in the process of reevaluating that methodology in order to ensure that we're, evaluating the most accurate way possible. But we can certainly share that information. It's been requested through a rate case as well. So we can pull that information forwards and share it with the committee.
So, Mr. Chairman, there's 3,000 miles of water infrastructure under our feet as we speak.
Correct.
With a 23% loss rate, even if it's improved slightly or improved for the better, if we look to some of the infrastructure money to attack that, I say this from a place of most of those people that will repair that infrastructure don't need college degrees. Most of those people that can repair that infrastructure can be recruited from public schools. And if we were to start repairs today from high school grads, by the time we get done that 23% repair, they will be retiring from the water department and from the streets department. So I just would encourage us, as we look at rate hikes, to look at the savings that we can get from the reduction of, it's a nightmare when we wake up and watch the news, water main break at Point Breeze, and that infrastructure often is over 100 years old, as I remember. And if we just started repairing lengths of it today, that I just think it will employ a lot of at-risk people, at-risk young people, if we just had a Marshall plan for that activity, Mr. Chairman. So if they will update you with that infrastructure information, Member Gilmore Richardson is constantly looking to get young people employed, and I think it just will help the city of Philadelphia if we just took advantage of what needs to be repaired and put it out there to our at-risk youth. I just know it will help us out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. On the topic of shifting costs, in my notes, stormwater management regulations require new and or redevelopment sites distributing greater than 15,000 square feet of earth to infiltrate, retain, or treat a certain amount of storm water on site. Can you give us an idea more about that requirement? And then also, if we would amend that requirement to cover sites distributing greater than 5,000 square feet, like what would be the impact?
Okay, I'll ask Deputy Commissioner Mark Camerata to address that.
Good morning, everyone. Mark Camerata, Deputy Commissioner, Planning and Environmental Services here with Philadelphia Water. Thank you for the question, Council Member. We've had our stormwater regulations in place since 2006, knowing that anyone who develops in the city may have an impact on our stormwater management requirements. So it was our way of trying to allow for sustainable development to happen throughout the city. We have seen hundreds and hundreds of projects meet the requirements of our stormwater regulations to date, and it's been instrumental in allowing us to manage stormwater and abate combined sewer overflows in the combined sewage section of the city, as well as providing benefit in our separate sewage section of the city. It is one of the things that across this country people look at having these stormwater regulations in place. When we looked at the earth disturbance threshold of 15,000 square feet, it really kind of met where nationally folks were going as part of looking at development regulations. We looked at 5,000 square feet and thought that threshold would be a significant administrative burden to try to manage. It's not a very big area. So we had to kind of use some data to say, how often do we see development? What development, quantities, knowing that the water department has injected itself into the development process. We do significant amount of utility reviews, these stormwater plan reviews, pre and post construction related inspections, all for the sake of trying to make sure that we can get these stormwater management benefits. The burden of the administrative burden of trying to regulate those sites was a little more than we could handle. And the return wasn't where we really needed it to be. We still regulate in some way. We are delegated responsibilities from the state to do erosion and sediment control related activities. There are still requirements, but they're not at the tune of all those requirements that you had said about infiltration and detention and flood control and channel protection. And we have some technical analyses to kind of show what the burden would be by lowering the threshold to 5,000 square feet, and we can follow up with that as well. But again, those regs have been in place since 2006, have been absolutely instrumental for us to meet regulatory requirements over the last 17 years plus, and honestly a successful and an instrumental tool in allowing us to think about water quality improvements moving forward.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. But just my last summary before I call on the next panel. So there's a couple of things. Moving forward, the rate hike for one issue is increase in capital projects as well as operational costs. Two, we can't use the, I call it ARPA funding, the federal funding, because it would impact our bond rating by moving the funding from, by accepting that funding to our traditional water department funding account will have an impact on our bond rating according to the finance department. Okay. I just want to try to make sure that we're doing all making sure that we're finding as many ways as possible to save costs. Again, just to ease that burden of any type of rate hike on our constituents, to try to keep it as minimum as possible. And so that's my summary for based upon your testimony regarding the reasonings on the justification for this type of rate hike, but also recognizing some of the key things that are put in place, like the TAP program, to help individuals who are significantly burdened by paying their water bills, and also a follow-up to make sure that we're in constant dialogue and saying everything that we can do possible with PennVest, the Shapiro administration, but most importantly, the legislators in Harrisburg, to help us rectify and get in front of this issue for the future. And so don't go. We do have a couple other individuals on other panels, and I may come back with some additional questions as well based upon their testimony as well. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir.
I have one more question I want to slide in there, Commissioner. And this is in terms of what's the process for the water department to actually do an analysis of all of our piping, right, throughout the city as relates to replacing our water mains, right? And the level of priority that's dedicated to doing that. How frequent are key water mains inspected, and pipes are replaced?
Okay. With the pipe replacement, I can tell you that when we look at water main replacement, these are items that we have increased the amount that we're doing. In the next 26 years, we'll do 18.6 miles per year. That's an increase. We're going to increase that to 42 miles per year by 2024. That costs us $2.6 million per mile. So again, over the last 26 years, we were doing 18.6. We're raising that to 42 miles per year, and that costs $2.5 million per mile. Sewer replacement, in the past 26 years, we did 8 miles per year. We're increasing that to 10 miles per year, and that will cost us $5.4.
You're on mute, sir. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So what I was saying was on the water main replacements, we have over the last 26 years, we had 18.6 miles per year. We've increased that to 42 miles per year, and that comes to $2.5 million per mile. And then with the sewer replacement, we're at 26 years, we had 8 miles per year. We'll increase that to 10 miles per year, and that has cost us $5.4 million per mile.
You on mute again?
Well, my computer has a mind of its own. It must be AI. I'm not touching it. But
understood.
Nevertheless, I gave you what our water main replacement, sewer replacements are. And so I would like Ben Jules, Deputy Commissioner of Operations, to talk about how we look and evaluate individual mains in the city and prioritize those replacements. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for the question. You know, in the operations unit, we have a variety of programs for leak detection. Obviously, we're constantly engaged in reactive leak detection. You know, leaks that are apparent, you know, are reported to us through the public, and we're engaged in trying to, you know, stop those leaks as quickly as possible, prevent impact on our infrastructure, on private infrastructure, in the public right of way, as quickly as we possibly can. We also have some preventative leak detection methods that we utilize. We do leak surveys of our large transmission mains periodically. We do leak surveys just along blocks, like planned neighborhood leak surveys. And we're currently piloting a new technology utilizing satellite technology for leak detection. It's yielded some really nice initial benefits that we think we can probably leverage on a larger scale, but we're still really in the pilot phase. But the goal of that is really to be able to literally look from a high level down at the city and more effectively and more efficiently deploy our employees on the ground. Doing that like really refined. I think there's a leak at this location. Is it on the water main? Is it on a service? Can I find it? And then can we fix it? Kind of strategy, rather than just kind of trying to make sure we're getting across the whole city generally and working block by block. Again, that's yielded some really great benefits for us. All of the information that the operations unit is learning in the field, all the information that we're gathering from leaks is being recorded in our work order management system, and then our linear asset planning group, which is, you know, feeding the capital planning program, is constantly doing a risk model assessment of the entire conveyance system. So they're looking at aspects such as age, construction materials, breaks on mains. They're considering other aspects of the capital improvement program, so we can kind of find efficiency by perhaps like if we're going to do a sewer already, we know we're going to be there. If the water main is in need of replacement, we'll do it at that time and create some of those cost savings by, you know, two birds with one stone. But to more generally answer your question, I think that, you know, we are proactively trying to assess the system every day, and the information and the data that's developed in the field is being fed into a risk assessment model that is being used to prioritize those water mains that are feeding into our capital improvement program, with the goals that the commissioner laid out of over 40 miles per year of capital replacement.
Do we see that there's more water main breaks in the winter versus the summer?
Absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to get an idea.
Yeah, and Commissioner, our Councilmember Johnson, just in response to that, you know, because we are aware of that trend, you know, we really step up our field operations during the winter. We go into what's called our winter schedule. We're working 2 offset 12-hour shifts, and the employees of the water department, the residents of Philadelphia, like those folks that are, you know, in the ditches in the winter, you know, knee deep in water, really show up. And really work hard through the winter season in order to, you know, protect the city and help reduce the impacts of those water main breaks. And we are really grateful for all those folks.
I have to say, I can't say thank you enough to the men and women that dedicate themselves to that job in the winter, in the cold of winter. There are times when their shift ends at midnight and they'll say, no, I want to stay. I want to finish. I'm trying to finish this. I have an obligation. And that's the kind of pride that they have with the water main replacement. But that's the type of pride they have throughout the organization. They take ownership of the problems they have. And that's what I'm most impressed with. And that's what I'm most proud of our employees.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee for this panel? Hearing none.
Yes, Chair. Excuse me.
Councilman Curtis Jones.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that I have seen in sub-freezing temperatures, members of the water department out there fixing water main breaks. So much so I remember giving a resolution citation to the department. The gentleman's beard had frozen over from the water that was spraying on it, and he kept working, which was incredible to me. And so I concur. One quick question. Are you or the streets department responsible for the sewer inlets?
Well, that would, I believe, would be water.
Okay. And the only reason I raised this is that I had so when your inlets, I used to call them suey holes. I think you remember it. You remember that?
Yeah.
But if they're right at the corner where major trucks turn and where buses turn, what inevitably happens is that they wind up broken.
Yeah.
And what is incredible to me is you can fix it one week and it'll be, broken again next week. And I know that's not your fault, but what I was thinking of, is there another design that includes those grates as opposed to the overhanging inlets that people can drive over? Have we given some thought to that design to reduce the number of instances of repair?
Let Ben Jules, Deputy Commissioner Operations, address that if you would, Ben.
Yes, Commissioner, thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Jones. In the sewer operations team, we are very familiar with the phenomenon of what we call a radius inlet being tipped over by vehicular traffic. One of the things that we do incorporate into our capital planning process is an evaluation of maintenance history for inlets. There is sometimes an opportunity to move an inlet from the footway out into the roadway, but as we all are likely aware, the urban environment below the street is often very crowded. And so what our design team will do is they'll put out a call to all the other utilities when they're planning for a project and evaluate whether there's space available in the cartway or the roadway in order to be able to relocate an inlet from the footway out into the roadway. And then that way we can get rid of the what you'll see is either a cast iron lid that's on top of the inlet or a concrete slab with a cast manhole in the middle. If we can move out into the street, we will attempt to do so. And from the operations perspective as well, when we have truly problematic locations that are creating a safety hazard, we can do the same evaluation ourselves and determine whether or not that's possible. But the reality of working in the crowded urban environment is that sometimes there just isn't space for us to be able to move an asset like that from the footway into the roadway. But it is something we evaluate, particularly in those locations that are regularly disturbed by vehicular traffic.
Well, I'm very excited about the fact that you keep track, because it was like a optical illusion, because I know it was fixed and we called it in, and then I come back and looked exactly the same way a week later, and I said, well, I know it was repaired. So if you could keep that kind of data and the cost differential between the concrete versus the metal, and you might remember this, Mr. Chairman, maybe 10 years ago, during the height of some of the folk that were addicted, there was a surge of people stealing the tops of the caps of the water holes and service holes, and they were recycling them and getting the value of the metal, and that was really dangerous. So how has that dissipated? That has changed now?
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. Theft is not as much of an issue as it was, and we've adapted how we install and maintain our inlets as well in order to try to prevent that. We've got a team of folks called our lock and cover crews. And one of their jobs is to go back through and retrofit those inlet covers that have castings. And what they'll do is they'll basically install a chain that connects the cover to the frame that it sits within. It's not going to prevent all theft. Someone who really wants an inlet cover will find a way. But it has been a very good deterrent, forcing people to kind of think twice about whether they have the ability to steal that. But generally speaking, the rate of theft has significantly receded of late, and I will knock on wood as I say that out loud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Hearing none. Thank you for your testimony, Commissioner Hayman. Again, as I said earlier, if you don't mind sticking around throughout the hearing.
Sure.
And thank you very much. Will the clerk please call the next panel?
For the next panel, we have Adam Nagel and Robert Ballinger.
Please state your name and title for the record and begin your testimony. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I am Adam Nagel, and I serve as campaign manager for Citizens for Pennsylvania's Future, also known as Penn Future. So good morning again, Chairman Johnson, members of the Transportation and Public Utilities Committee, and I also acknowledge that Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson is with us here today. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today in relation to resolution number 230061. Penn Future is a membership-based nonprofit environmental organization dedicated to leading the transition to a clean energy economy in Pennsylvania and beyond. Penn Future strives to protect our air, water, and land, and to empower citizens to build sustainable communities for future generations. A main focus of our work is to improve and protect water resources and water quality across Pennsylvania, with particular emphasis on the Delaware River Basin and Philadelphia, through public outreach and education, advocacy, and litigation. The Philadelphia Water Department formally filed notice on January 24th, 2023 of its desire to increase rates for residential and commercial ratepayers. The department requested a total increase of about 20% over 2 years for residential ratepayers. This represents a substantial increase for Philadelphia residents who are already dealing with rising energy costs. To be clear, Penn Future strongly supports additional funding for water utilities across Pennsylvania, including the Philadelphia Water Department. Water systems across the Commonwealth have fallen into disrepair due to generations of underinvestment. Our organization has advocated at every level of government to secure funding for water infrastructure to improve water quality, reduce flooding, and help Pennsylvanians access clean natural resources to provide relief from increasing heat due to climate change. We recognize that many of the financial challenges facing the water department are not unique to Philadelphia and are a direct result of prolonged underinvestment in our water infrastructure system at the federal level. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, the federal government accounted for 63% of total spending in the water sector in 1977. It accounted for just 9% of total capital spending in 2017. The burden to maintain the city's water system has fallen to residents in the absence of sustainable and equitable federal funding. Not only has the federal government often left funding for infrastructure to local municipalities, the nature of the support it does provide has changed from the previous era as well. The Clean Water Act established the Construction Grants Program upon its passage in 1972. Administered by the Environmental Protection Agency, this program delivered grants directly to municipalities and helped fund much of our nation's current water infrastructure. Despite the program's early success, it was replaced by the Clean Water State Revolving Fund in 1987, which was followed by the creation of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund in 1996. Although these funds provide critical funding to address water infrastructure needs, they are loan programs that require the state to match the allocated federal funds. This has increased state and local financial capacity requirements while placing additional burdens on paying for investments in water infrastructure on communities in need like Philadelphia. Recognizing the constraints that exist for the water department, funding provided via the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, to the city should serve as a critical lifeline to the department. Philadelphia received $1.4 billion from the federal government via ARPA to assist with relief efforts related to the COVID-19 pandemic and recession. It also authorized Philadelphia to invest in its water infrastructure. To date, Mayor Tenney's administration has spent roughly $600 million of these funds, leaving approximately $800 million that must be allocated by the end of 2024. And although it appears from testimony provided in connection to the rate proceeding and as a part of the City of Philadelphia's budget proceedings that ARPA funding would not necessarily provide immediately for relief for residents, it would significantly reduce the department's debt service in the future. This would in turn mitigate rising costs for those who can least afford them. It is also unclear thus far from the city's testimony provided during the budget process to what extent PWD has advocated for greater assistance from the Recession, Inflation, and Reopening Reserve. We also note that there may be a follow-up hearing related to today's proceedings, and we look forward for greater clarity on that item. Testimony from the Finance Department indicates that PWD was allocated $13.9 million from this reserve in FY23 to cover the impact of inflation on costs for materials and chemicals. But the Finance Department's testimony does not make clear whether PWD sought support from the reserve for FY24. The recent threat to the city's drinking water supply due to a toxic chemical spill highlighted the vulnerability to one of the city's most precious resources. All residents deserve access to clean water at an affordable rate. The rate board proceeding and previous filings seem to indicate that PWD believes that it cannot sustain operations without significant cost increases for ratepayers, regardless of funding opportunities that may be available to it. This is not a sustainable pathway to ensure that all residents have the same access to clean water. If past behavior is the best predictor of future performance, then we can expect that PWD and the City of Philadelphia will continue to place more burden on ratepayers to fund the city's water system. As time goes on, this will have significant consequences for homeowners who can no longer afford their water bills, and for renters who cannot afford to pay rent in the face of increases from landlords who will try to keep up with rising utility costs. This fundamental resource will grow ever more expensive, and access will be placed out of reach for Philadelphia residents. This approach is untenable. As such, we recommend the following. Achieve greater clarity around PWD's ability to access funding from the Recession, Inflation, and Reopening Reserve and what that would mean relative to its proposed rate increase. If funding is available, this must be allocated to the department to offset costs for ratepayers and subsequently reduce or eliminate the request to increase rates. 2, utilize available ARPA funding for the financing of capital projects to reduce long-term debt service obligations and mitigate rising costs for ratepayers. 3, to the extent that the 2 items above do not eliminate the need for a rate increase, utilize the general fund to account for any short-term costs that may impact PWD's operations through FY24 and FY25. 4, continue the conversation around amending the stormwater management regulations to cover city-funded projects with an earth disturbance over 5,000 square feet rather than the current 15,000 square feet. Not only will this significantly increase Philadelphia's ability to manage stormwater, but will ultimately reduce costs for ratepayers by placing the burden of responsibility on developers. And 5, PWD must examine alternative financing options as it relates to its stormwater management to ensure that costs are shared equitably throughout the city, as our ability to effectively manage our stormwater impacts us all. We hope that this hearing continues the broader examination required to ensure that PWD meets its obligations to ensure that Philadelphians have access to clean water and ensure affordable costs for ratepayers. Change is needed within city government to ensure the department's long-term sustainability and affordability for residents. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Robert, state your name and title for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson and members of the Transportation and Public Utilities Committee of City Council. My name is Robert W. Ballinger, and I'm a senior attorney and director of the Energy Unit at Community Legal Services, also known as CLS. I'm testifying here today as a CLS lawyer who represents low-income Philadelphians, not in the capacity CLS serves as public advocate in water rate proceedings. Every day, CLS speaks with Philadelphians who are having trouble affording their water and often must choose between paying their water bill or paying for food, rent, or their mortgage. In a typical year, tens of thousands of people will have their water shut off. And while we advocate to get the water department to reconnect people, there are significant challenges to keeping the water on for all who need it. Unaffordability of water service disproportionately burdens Black and Brown people in Philadelphia and across the country due to systemic racism that leads to both poverty and neglect of communities of color. We are here today because we are concerned water will become even more unaffordable for the majority of PWD customers who cannot access assistance programs. However, City Council and the City Administration can help to increase water affordability by diversifying funding and helping to identify cost savings for the water department and its customers. Without those changes, we are going to see even more expensive water bills. CLS recognizes the great need for the water department to undertake environmental and infrastructure improvements. Those improvements are necessary. They cannot come at the cost of people who are already struggling to get by. Today, I'm here to propose specific and actionable steps City Council and the Mayor can take to help avoid raising rates and to maintain water affordability in Philadelphia. The first thing is to provide capital funding each year for the water department from diverse sources. So water customers and debt financed by water bill payments are not the sole sources of funding for environmental and infrastructure improvements. These improvements have huge benefits, but there are other ways to pay for them than through people's bills. As a starting point, a portion of the millions of dollars in the city coffers from the American Rescue Plan Act should be dedicated to funding the water department's stormwater management capital projects. These projects provide broad benefits to the city, including crime reduction, decreased public health costs, and economic benefits beyond water department operations. In the long term, local, state, and federal funds should be allocated directly to water department stormwater capital projects annually in an amount sufficient to stabilize customer rates and charges. Doing so will avoid the need for the water department to continue to pass on higher and higher costs to customers. Second, City Council and the administration can convene stakeholders to identify initiatives to save costs for the water department, which will help offset future needs to raise rates. For example, in 2013, the water department began generating its own power at the Northeast Water Pollution Control Plant, providing up to 85% of its own electrical requirements. Identifying more projects like this in partnership or collaboration with other city departments, businesses, and stakeholders would save customers money over the long term. The water department anticipates raising operating and maintenance costs long into the future, setting the stage for further proposed rate increases. Identifying future cost savings is vital to maintaining affordable water. Finally, we urge City Council to increase funding for plumbing repairs and upgrades to help Philadelphians lower their water bills by conserving water. Many Philadelphians have plumbing issues that they can't afford to fix and are making their water bills unreasonably high. A family that is barely able to pay for a normal water bill can't pay extra when a leaking faucet, running toilet, or other plumbing issue causes their bills to spike. With the water department's implementation of its new metering system, unusually high usage can and should be identified quickly before weeks of plumbing issues lead to even more unaffordable water bills. Presently, when these issues are identified, many families can't quickly access funding for repairs. While BSRP and whole homes repairs help offset the costs of many of these types of repairs and are incredibly valuable programs, they exist to help people whose systems are already broken. The city should create a rapid response and repair program, accessible to both tenants and homeowners when high usage is detected. This program should be broadly available to those without adequate means to hire a plumber and not require income verification. It is vital that people do not get left out if they are unable to complete burdensome paperwork. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before the committee today and look forward to continuing to working with City Council members to address the crisis of water affordability in Philadelphia. Thank you for your consideration of this testimony.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of this committee? I have one question for Adam. Adam, one of your recommendations was using a specific pot of money for debt relief. Can you go back over that particular recommendation? And I'm quite sure these recommendations have been submitted to the committee, correct? Okay, I don't have them, but I will follow up. But can you just reiterate that one particular recommendation, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Are you referring to the recession, inflation, and reopening reserve?
No, there was one part where you talked about supporting debt relief as a part of a way of not increasing rates in the long term.
Oh, so that goes back to, again, the American Rescue Plan Act, and I think that we would echo Mr. Ballinger's testimony that we believe that the American Rescue Plan Act funds should be used to finance stormwater management projects based on the co-benefits that are related to that, in addition to improving our ability to manage our stormwater. So, if we, and this is something that I believe has been detailed by the finance department during City Council's budget process as well, that if you were to provide, funds via the American Rescue Plan Act, it would help the water department decrease some of its debt financing obligations. It's quite simply because they would not have to pursue the low interest loans that have been detailed by the commissioner and Deputy Director Carroll in this hearing and in others. So I think that using opportunities where there is money available to finance these projects without having to pay interest over the long term is important and something that should be considered.
Now, I have to ask this question, and I'll follow a finance as well. So, but if finance official response is we can't provide the funding to the water department because we have an impact on our bond rating, right? Because that's the official response from the administration, like officially, right? And then I guess how does that jive with the federal government saying we're giving you this money for infrastructure? So I think I got two answers. I mean, two perspectives that at some point in time, these two perspectives have to be resolved, because if you're going to give me funding that's going to impact my bond rate, then what else are we using those funds for if they were actually given to us? Particularly, I think Joe Biden came touting the water department. He was like pretty happy, pretty proud to say he was giving the city of Philadelphia funding for, our infrastructure for the water department. So it kind of begs the question, well, if that conflicts with our bond rating, because obviously we don't want our bond rating to go down, then what happens to all those funds?
I think that's the question that at least for Penn Future, we struggle with as well in resolving the two different perspectives here. I think it's important that we come up with some sort of a solution, and I think under your leadership in this committee that we can hopefully see something, if not in the near future, before ARPA funds must be allocated and ultimately spent.
Yeah, well, that comes to my mind. Not even in the near future, because I think we're on the timeline to spend this money, right?
Yes.
That's what it seems like. Okay. All right. Well, we got some marching orders, particularly around those two perspectives that came out of this hearing. Is very, very glaring for me. And so we'll definitely do our due diligence and follow up in a transparent way so the public can know how we are going to be moving forward. Any other questions or comments from members of this committee? Robert, do you have any comments? I think you're about to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could speak to the
Sure.
question posed. I think the nuance that perhaps needs to be explored a little bit more is for what purposes the funds would be granted to the water department, because that's what's going to dictate the outcome. And I believe under the water department's general bond ordinance, certain grants in aid of construction are not project revenues to the water department. Because of that, I do not believe that the same concerns would arise if compared to grants that are project or would become project revenues and be available for payment of operating expenses, for example. I think that's what the department was trying to underscore a little bit earlier today, and what really I believe this committee can help pin down, because that's the route to providing a long-term solution, is to ensure that the water department's operating revenues are adequate for all the purposes required, while also offsetting some of their capital program needs, and thereby reducing over time the debt service they have to pay, whether it's a low interest rate debt service or high interest rate debt service. I'm sort of neutral to that. I do believe that the borrowing they're engaged in with PennVest is advantageous compared to issuing revenue bonds. But again, the long-term need here is to turn the corner a little bit, is to offset capital program costs, because we all recognize, like the stormwater program, it definitely contributes to a lot of different things in the city in terms of quality of life that do not directly sort of align with the experience a customer has when they go to the tap and turn on the water.
Okay, interesting. Good point. Okay. How does one second. I'm just taking in consideration the fact that from the administration standpoint, meaning the water department, they want to make sure that they're operating as efficiently as possible, right? And again, I'm thinking about from the bond rating standpoint, and then us providing additional funding on the top of them maintaining their books, so to speak. And everything is being done properly, but because you're receiving additional funding, to me, it's added value, not so much a supplement, right? Because I'm already doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but nothing takes away from me to receiving additional funding from additional funding to do capital projects, just to offset the impact rate increase they're going to have in the future on the customer. But something you just mentioned, which is interesting, is that, and I see a lot of stormwater management projects all throughout, particularly I see in my district. And I know Councilman Curtis Jones said there's some big ones taking place in his district as well. And that's a result of, the development and the pressure on our system, right? But you just mentioned that doesn't directly impact the customer drinking the water. It's interesting. Okay.
At least not in the immediate term.
In the immediate term.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I want to thank the two of you for being here and providing testimony. We will do our due diligence to do a follow-up to answer some of these key questions as we stay on top of it. And we thank you for taking time out of your schedule and testifying today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions or comments from members of this committee? Hearing none. At this time, we're going to ask for all panelists to please disconnect as we go into public comment. Will the clerk please call those who have signed up for public comment, please?
First, commenting on Resolution 230061 is Stephanie Wine.
This is Stephanie.
Hello, how you doing?
Good.
Can you state your name and begin your public comment?
Yes, my name is Stephanie Wine, W-E-I-N. I am the Clean Water and Conservation Advocate at Penn Environment, a statewide citizens-based environmental advocacy group. Penn Environment is a statewide citizen-based organization working to promote clean air, clean water, and protecting our great outdoors. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify at today's hearing. So it goes without saying that PWD has many crucial responsibilities related to water that protect our health and environment and improve our communities and quality of life. Like other clean water utilities across the country, PWD must work to ensure safe drinking water, tackling lead in drinking water, maintaining infrastructure, tackling repairs like water main breaks, and of course complying with its federal legal requirements to reduce pollution from entering Philadelphia's great rivers and streams like the Delaware and the Schuylkill. And cities across the country are making great strides in addressing these threats. But sadly, this discharges of billions of gallons of raw sewage from antiquated combined sewer systems are significant sources of pollution for Philadelphia's great rivers and the communities through which they line. And while the Water Department's long-term control plan, also often referred to as Green City Clean Waters program, has begun to reduce the volume of these discharges of raw sewage into Philadelphia's rivers and streams, it isn't happening fast enough to ensure the cleanup of the city's waterways. However, in 2021, historic opportunities were put forth by Congress and by the Biden administration to distribute unprecedented amounts of federal funding, which can be used to tackle the sewage problems plaguing Philadelphia's rivers. This includes grants to cities like Philadelphia that do not have to be repaid to the federal government. Unfortunately, it appears that the Water Department has not taken full advantage of this historic funding opportunity, essentially free money for the city's water infrastructure. There's numerous examples of cities across the country taking advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime federal funding for water quality improvements. A few examples from our neighboring cities include Chester, just down the road, got a $3.4 million grant from EPA's Sewage Overflow and Stormwater Reuse Municipal Grants, the OSG, and that was awarded to Chester City to address stormwater and flooding problems that will both reduce flooding and improve recreational access. And then Wilmington received a $15 million grant in congressionally directed funding for clean water infrastructure improvements. The Philadelphia Water Department, in light of these resources, shouldn't be burdening everyday Philadelphians with rate increases without first proving that they have maximized the revenue available through these new federal sources of money. And so we think in order to know if the Philadelphia Water Department is taking full advantage of the funding being put forth through the federal programs associated with clean water, we recommend that the City Council request that the Philadelphia Water Department deliver a detailed report to City Council and our ratepayers that address the steps that PWD has taken to date to tap into federal funding opportunities identified in this testimony, which I'll be also supporting using written caveats. B, how much money they've applied for from each of these programs and the specific projects that they propose to fund. C, if they've received the money for which that they've applied and how much of these appropriations would cover versus the total cost of each project. And D, information showing which neighborhoods each project is located within the city, and where these resources are going towards within the city. At a hearing before City Council on October 24th, 2022, Commissioner Hayman and Mike Carroll stated there are barriers associated with PennVest procedures for access to a key source of significant federal grant funding, the EPA's Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, often just called SRF funding. At that hearing, and then again in April 2023, they assured the council members that they were taking the steps to attempt to convince PennVest to remove these barriers. But to date, it's unclear what steps, if any, PWD has taken to advocate for this change. So we recommend that City Council request information from PWD that lays out the steps that PWD has taken to communicate these concerns to PennVest, when these communications took place, any responses from PennVest, and in many other jurisdictions, water utilities are collaborating with local elected officials like yourself to advocate for policy change on their behalf. And so to date, it's unclear to us if PWD has asked members of City Council, the mayor's office, or state or federal legislators to advocate to PennVest on their behalf. So these questions should be answered before PWD considers a move to increase rates for local customers. And so finally, beyond the new sources of federal funding, EPA has encouraged the use of provisions related to borrowing and targeting. If PWD utilized PennVest low interest loan increases instead of their current loans with higher interest rates, it could save the PWD and in turn Philly ratepayers up to $50 million each year. So we recommend that council offices request PWD to report on its plans to save taxpayer resources and ratepayer resources through refinancing and allocation of these savings to other water pollution reduction measures that improve community life. Clean water is critical. Rate increases may be necessary at some point. However, until and unless the Philadelphia Water Department proves the need for raising rates, that they have fully tapped into all the other pots of money available and ensures that the funds are going to priority projects that have been shown for public officials and elected officials to see and to understand, and for the public to see and understand, they should not be saddling the Philadelphia ratepayers with an increased rate. Thanks so much for the opportunity to testify at today's hearing. I'll be submitting this in writing as well.
Thank you very much. Will the clerk please call the next individual for public testimony?
Next, we have Lance Haver.
Good day, Lance. Just say your name and title and begin your public testimony.
Hello.
Hey, Lance, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You can state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Lance Haver. I'm the former Director of Consumer Affairs for the City of Philadelphia and currently a participant trying to stop the Water Department's proposed 21% rate increase. Sadly, the Water Rate Board's appointed public advocate, who you just heard from, is supporting 2 years of successive rate hikes. totaling over $92 million. So I am fighting them as well. Excuse me. Councilmember Jones asked about how much water is being lost. During the hearings, the number wasn't 21%. It's actually 40%. That's what came out of the hearings. I'm not sure why Mr. Jewell didn't acknowledge that, but at the hearings, that is the number that's being used. The facts are undeniable. The Water Department has sought to raise rates before it has taken available steps to lower its costs and increase its revenues. For the Water Department, the path of least resistance, with the help of the rate board's advocate, is through our bank accounts. While I agree that cutting costs and finding efficiencies is harder than just getting the rate board to raise rates, avoiding the hard work by well-paid Water Department bureaucrats should not be rewarded with more money and fancier offices. We should demand that before any rate increase is granted, any rate increase, the Water Department be forced to do the hard work of saving us money. In understanding I don't have much time, I'll only list a few of the steps that the Water Department should take before they actually filed for the rate increase. The Water Department should combine billing, metering, and services with PGW. This would save ratepayers millions of dollars. Is there really any reason that the two municipally owned utilities cannot work together and share services? 2, Philadelphia Water Department should stop renovating their Center City offices. Discovery requests at the public hearings have proven that the Water Department is spending just under $2 million of our money to improve their Center City office while asking for year after year after year, 4 consecutive years of rate increases. During the public hearings, all on record, Philadelphia Water Department's Deputy Water Commissioner of Communication, whose office is actually being renovated, in response to a direct question from a member of the public, refused to answer, and the hearing examiner claimed that no one who worked in the offices being renovated was prepared to answer that question. 3, the Water Department should move out of its headquarters and out of Center City. There's no reason for ratepayers to pay more so the Water Department can be in the high-rent district. Philadelphia Water Department should find if PGW's offices in North Philadelphia has extra space, and if not, Philadelphia Water Department should move its offices to one of Philadelphia's many business districts that could use an anchor to help economic development. 4, Philadelphia Water Department has hired at least 6 consultants and 2 law firms to help it raise its rates by 21%, and not a single consultant to find ways of lowering costs. If Philadelphia Water Department were more interested in saving ratepayers money than in raising our rates, they would hire consultants to help them save money. During last week's hearings, it became clear that the Water Department's own consultants, the ones they're paying for, believe that management, operating, and revenue audits would lead to cost savings. The Water Commissioner, who was at that hearing, himself said under cross-examination he would support such audits, and yet no such audit has ever been done for the Water Department. They hire consultants to find ways to raise rates, don't hire anyone to find ways to save costs, save expenses, and become more efficient. 5, Philadelphia Water Department should look for innovative technologies to stop water from leaking out of the system. During the hearing, an uncontested fact was placed on the record. For every 100 gallons of water the Water Department uses, ratepayers pay to clean and process, only 60% reaches Water Department meters. 40% of the water we pay to clean and make usable is lost. The national average, which includes other older water systems like Philadelphians, loses 20%. We have 100% more loss than the average loss, and not a single consultant's been hired to help the Water Department find ways to stop the leaks. And by the way, that's a very simple thing the city's operating budget could use the ARPA money for. The city already pays for a certain amount of water. All the ARPA money has to be done is set aside to pay for the lost water. Wouldn't affect bond ratings, wouldn't affect any of that. Those are just excuses the administration comes up with so they don't have to do the hard work of figuring out how it can work. Instead of saying, let's figure out how we can use the ARPA money, they set aside the ARPA money for the administration's pet projects and refuse to use it to help us lower water rates and make the rate increase unnecessary. 6, we should make it easier to get households on low-income plans and pay bills. This would help with collections and avoid the cost of shutoffs and turn-ons. PGW should accept applications for low-income plans as well as payment for water bills. Check cashing places and drugstores should be allowed to collect water bills as they do for cable and other utilities. Why should it be easier for me to pay my Comcast bill than it is for me to pay my water bill? Philadelphia Water Department should lower the fee charged to pay online. I was shocked to find out during the hearings that none of the Water Department's witnesses or their consultants knew what the fee was or how it was arrived at. 7, Water Department should find ways to cut costs when it purchases chemicals and other consumables. In the previous rate case, a member of a municipal water buying co-op offered to let the Water Department join so PWD could save money on its purchases. The Water Department failed to pursue this option, saying it wasn't their role, someone else in the administration should do it. As a result, we continue to pay higher and higher costs for the chemicals that we use. 8, Philadelphia Water Department failed to ask City Council to include ARPA money for the Water Department in the budget cycle. As I said, they claim all these reasons why they can't do it, but they didn't have a meeting with City Council and figure out a way that they can do it. And of course, it may be impolite to point it out, but one of the reasons why the Water Commissioner can't press the mayor to use the ARPA money to make the rate increase unnecessary is the Water Commissioner serves at the pleasure of the mayor. And it's a very uncomfortable situation for him to come before council and say, I can't do it because my boss says I can't do it. 9, Philadelphia Water Department failed to ask City Council's help in getting pen vests, which we've had some discussion about today. And this is really shocking because one of the members of the Penn Vest board, State Rep Morgan Cephas, was a former City Council employee. You would think that they would reach out to council and say, hey, here's a former employee of City Council who's now a state rep on the on the Penn Vest board. Could you help us and get that money? Instead, it's much easier for the Water Department to get the rate increase from the mayoral appointments on the rate board. Who's on the rate board? The former Water Commissioner, the former Chief Legal Counsel for PGW, 2 real estate developers, and Mr. Popowski. 10, the Water Department should use its resources as an engine of economic development to help lift Philadelphians out of poverty. As it stands now, the Water Department does not consider where the companies it uses are located. And the headquarters for the company that collects the fee online, which the Water Department didn't know how much it was, that company, their headquarters isn't even in the United States. As you heard earlier, the Philadelphia Water Department keeps approximately $150 million in a bank. The bank they chose is U.S. Bank, a bank that has no retail branches in Philadelphia, offers no mortgages or other loans to Philadelphians. The company the Water Department hired to read the meters is based in North Carolina. The call center making the appointments for the meter replacements is in Georgia. And the Water Department doesn't have a single employee dedicated to recruiting water-intensive industries to move into Philadelphia to both create living wage jobs and sell more water, making less of a need for a rate increase. There are many other points, but I'm running out of time. Suffice to say, the rate board's public advocate has not raised any of these points in the hearings, does not have a client relationship with the public, failed to meet with any registered community organization, and despite many, many requests, refused to form a client advisory group. The only way that we can change the behavior of the Water Department to look for cost efficiencies first, to look for cost savings first, to look to bring in more businesses, to look to hire local Philadelphians. The only way we can do that is by stopping this rate increase. Unless the rate increase is rejected, the Water Department will continue to fail to hire consultants to cut costs, find deficiencies, seek City Council's help with Penvest, and allocating ARPA funds. The only way to force the Water Department to make the improvements is to reject the rate increase in its entirety and force the Water Department to make the needed changes. And no, Philadelphia Water Department will not run out of money. As you heard from the Water Department itself, it has over $150 million in the bank, more than enough to cover its costs as it works to become more efficient and better serve Philadelphia. The water commissioner himself is on record saying, if the water department doesn't get the rate hike it's seeking, it will have to make changes. And that is what we need, changes in the operation of the water department and changes in the people who advocate for the public. I do appreciate your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilman Jones has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The testimony just given cited a number of companies and banks that have less than a commitment to the city of Philadelphia. And in particular, I wonder what the economic impact of those decisions not being Philadelphia based, not being within our borders, how much does that affect our treasury? And, I don't know if the commissioner is still around, and maybe he can respond to some of the comments just given.
Commissioner Hayman. Councilman Jones has a question for response.
Yeah. I don't have that information at my fingertips. We'd have to respond in writing.
Because the gentleman raised a number of interesting points by which decisions were made that weren't necessarily factored into the economic impact of the city. And everything that we should do, it should have a Philly benefit, Philly first flavor. And he cited that relationship I mentioned before about the repairs of the estimated 23% water leakage. If we're talking about rate increases to the customers, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but I would like to think we looked at every possible savings, every possible alternative to rate increases. And I wish you would.
I want to say clearly, one saying that I use around the office repeatedly is sharpen your pencils. When my staff is working on the rate increase on any project and they bring it to me, I'm often saying to them, go back and sharpen your pencil. Where is there more money that we can trim so it's not as expensive? Is there a way to cut back and still provide the same service? That is our mantra every day. And so they have been pushed regularly in a professional manner. Now, I must say that as a unit or department of the city, we follow through the procurement procedures that are on all city departments. And as a result, we put out an RFP, we do it in line with city requirements, and then we successfully hire someone to do the individual work that is required. And so I'm sure that all that we've done is in line and in step with what the city requires. We're always happy to have Philadelphia-based groups involved, and I'm not sure that they're not. Like I said, I don't have the paperwork right in front of me, but everything we've done as far as procuring contractors to assist us is in line with the rules and regulations of the city of Philadelphia.
No, I don't doubt that that is true, but there is a evaluation process called best value. And what best value takes into account is not only the lowest responsible bidder, but those impacts that the company makes to the Philadelphia local economy. And I'd be interested, and now I am interested in looking at those contracts that you issue to see if in fact, we have followed that spirit of procurement. And could you provide that analysis to the chair?
Yes.
Anything else? Councilman Jones?
No, I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the easiest way to see what's important to the water department is how they spend money. They spend money on consultants seeking rate increases. They don't spend any money on consultants to find ways to save money. It's really that simple. If they were as concerned about saving us money as they are about reaching to our pocket and taking more, they would use the same number of consultants to save money as they do to raise rates.
I disagree, Mr. Chairman, with the proposition that he's presenting. Our engineers every day look at a project to try. We're not a for-profit organization, and that's what I think is being lost in the conversation. We are not a for-profit organization. Is our utility. It is our desire to simply receive the monies we need to protect the health and safety of our community by designing projects that address that. Our engineers are trained engineers. They're some of the best in the country, and they look at ways to save money. Like I said, they take ownership of the program. They have no desire to inflate the costs. It's their desire to make it as sharp and as concise as possible. And our contractors assist us also with that. So the blanket statement that we only hire people to help us raise the rate is incomplete at best.
Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner, for sticking around and following up. And is there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay. Well, hearing none, this concludes the hearing for today. I did get a request for additional follow-up regarding the Finance Committee, which I will discuss with my colleague in terms of how we move forward. But we thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule testifying, as well as those who are in attendance as relates to city council members. Thank you very much. This concludes the hearing for the day. Take care.